In this video, we'll set up our server in DigitalOcean. The first thing that we need to do is navigate to the DigitalOcean homepage. You can use this link, or you may also use my referral link in the course resource to get $200 credit so that you can play around for free for 2 months. Then you can create a new account by hitting the Sign Up button on the top right. You may sign up with Google, or GitHub, or sign up with email. If you're using email, you need to enter your full name, email address, and password, then hit the Sign Up button. Once you've signed up, you'll receive an email to verify your account. Go to your email and hit the verification link to verify your account. Once you have verified your account, you can hit the Create button, then hit the Droplets menu. This will take you to the Create Droplets page. As noted in the DigitalOcean official guide, droplets are flexible Linux-based virtual machines, or VMs, that run on top of virtualized hardware. Each droplet you create is a new server that you can use. On the Create Droplets page, you can choose the data center of your server. In my case, I'll select Singapore. Next, in the Choose an Image section, let's go to the Marketplace and then find LAMP. So LAMP stack will install Nginx, MySQL, and PHP on your droplet. If you want to use Apache instead of Nginx, you may use LAMP. For now, we'll select the LAMP option. Next, in the Choose Size option, you may select a CPU option. In my case, I'll choose the regular option, which is the lowest price. And for educational purposes, I'll select the $6 per month. Okay, next, in the Choose Authentication Method section, you'll find 2 authentication options. If you choose SSH keys, you can log into your server through SSH without needing to enter your account's password. To choose this option, ensure you have configured the SSH key in your local machine. We'll learn how to configure the SSH key in a future lesson. So, for now, let's choose the password option. Then enter our password in the Create Root Password input. Then, in the Finalize Details section, you can specify how many droplets you want to create. In this case, we can leave it as 1 droplet. You can then enter a hostname for your droplet. In my case, I'll call it Laravel app. You can optionally enter some tags for your droplet in the tags input box. In my case, Laravel. Then, you may assign the droplet to a specific project by selecting it in the project selection. Finally, let's hit the Create Droplet button to actually create the droplet. It will take some time to process. Okay, once it's finished, you'll see your created droplet in the Resources section. Now, let's copy the server's IP address to the clipboard. Then, let's open up our terminal and then log into our server through SSH like this. SSH root @ and then paste the IP address of our server. Hit Enter. Hit Yes. And then enter the password for our server. It seems that the server isn't ready yet. Let's try again. Then re-enter the password. Okay, once login succeeds, you'll find a welcome message. And you'll see the system information of your droplet. Okay, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video. In the Linux environment, there's a special user called root. This account has very broad privileges, which means having full authority to manage the system. That's why it is not recommended to use this account regularly. So, let's create a new user by running the add user command. Then specify the username that we will create. You can give it whatever name you like, but in my case, I'll call it Laravel. Hit enter to proceed. Here, we get some information about the user creation, and we'll also be asked to enter the new user's password. Just enter a strong password, and then enter once again to confirm. Then, you may optionally fill in additional information such as full name, room number, and other information about the user. Or, you can simply hit enter to ignore the input. You will have a confirmation message confirming the information that you have entered. Hit Y and press enter to proceed. Now, we have a new user with regular account privileges. However, when we log in with a regular account, we may sometimes need to do administrative stuff. What we might do is log out as a regular user and log back in as the root user. Or, we might log in as a regular user in one terminal, and log in as a root user in another terminal at the same time. To avoid that, we can apply the root privileges to our regular user account like this. This will allow that user to be able to execute commands with administrative rights by adding sudo in front of each command. This command essentially adds the Laravel user to the sudo group, allowing the user to use the sudo command. To test our new user, let's log out from our remote server by typing exit, then hit enter. Then log back in with a new user account. Once you've logged in, you'll find a welcome message as you found when logging in as a root account. However, you'll see the account user's name on the terminal prompt. In the previous video, we created Droplet and installed the LEMP stack in our server. However, at the time I'm recording this video, if I see the PHP version, I have PHP version 8.0 installed. Meanwhile, Laravel 10 is the current version, and it needs PHP version 8.1 or above. So, in this video, we'll upgrade the PHP version, and upgrade some PHP dependencies. First, let's add the PHP repository to our server. Press enter to continue. After that, let's update the dependencies of our server. Last, let's install PHP. PHP FPM, and some PHP extensions to make our Laravel application work properly. Hit Y and then hit enter to continue. It will take some time to download and install on our server. Once that is done, let's verify the PHP version using the php-v. Okay, now I have PHP version 8.1 on my server. We can also see the PHP modules installed in our server using php-m. Now, you may remove the old PHP package by running this command. We have lemp stack installed in our server, but to make our server really work, we still need to make some tweaks. The first thing that we need to do is to configure Nginx, because currently it serves only static content. So, if we enter our server's IP address in our browser, we'll get this page. So here we need to tell Nginx to use a PHP processor so that it can handle dynamic content. Alright, let's head over to our terminal. Then, in our remote server, let's cd into the Nginx directory. Then, if we inspect the directory using this command, we'll see in the site's available directory 2 configuration files, default and DigitalOcean. Then, in the site's enabled directory, we'll see a symlink that points to DigitalOcean configuration file. So, what we'll do here is define a new configuration file inside the site's available directory. After that, we'll create a symlink pointing to our new configuration file. A common convention when creating configuration files is to give them the same name as their domain name. However, since I don't have any domain, I'll call it Laravel app. I'll enter my password. Next, let's go to the Laravel official guide. Hit the deployment menu. Go to server configuration. And then copy the server configuration code. Switch back over to our terminal. And then paste the code. For now, let's replace the server name with our server's IP address and then adjust the root path. In my case, var www Laravel app public. Let me explain a few directives. The listen directive defines the port number that Nginx will listen to. In this case, it will listen on port 80, the default HTTP port. The server name directive defines the name of the virtual server. We can point it to our server's domain name or server's IP address. The root directive defines the document root of our website. Then, the index directive defines files that will be used as an index. Files are checked in a specific order. For example, if the index.php file is available, Nginx will use it as the index file. But if it was not found, Nginx will use index.html as index file. The first location block will be matched with the request that contains a single segment such as /index.html, /foo, or /bar. Since it includes a try files directive, Nginx will check the existence of files matching a URI request in the specified order and uses the first found file for request processing. If Nginx cannot find the appropriate file, it will return a 404 error. This second location block deals with the .php file by pointing Nginx to the fastcgi configuration file and the php 8.1 fpm.sock file, which declares what socket is associated with php fpm. After adding this content, we can hit Ctrl+X. This will show a message confirming the change. Hit Y and press Enter to continue. Now, if we inspect the Nginx directory again, we'll find our new configuration files. To enable our new configuration, we need to create a symbolic link or symlink inside the site's enabled directory. Now, let's see the site's enabled directory. Okay, now we have our server configuration enabled. To ensure that Nginx using our new server configuration, we can unlink the DigitalOcean configuration file. We can also test our new configuration file for syntax errors by typing sudo nginx-t. Here I get a warning message in the first line, but I think it's no problem since it's not an error message. So, if you find any errors, recheck your configuration file. But if you find these messages, everything is good. Next, to apply these changes, we need to restart the Nginx service. And we also need to reload php-fpm. Now if we head over to our browser, and then reload the page, we'll find the Nginx welcome page, which is not the expected page. I expected a 404 error page, but it's okay, we'll fix it later. So now let's switch back over to our terminal. Then, let's reopen our server configuration file. So here, we pointed the root to this directory. So, let's copy the directory path, and then create the directory. Now, let's cd into that directory. And create a PHP file to test our new server configuration. Inside this file, let's call the PHP info function. Basically, this function will display all about PHP information on your server. To save the change, let's hit Ctrl+X. Hit Y to confirm, and hit Enter. Next, if we inspect the var directory, the directory is owned by the user and group www.data, which is associated with the web server such as Apache or Nginx. So, we need to change the ownership of this directory to Laravel user and www.data group. We can do that by executing this command. We also need to modify the file mode by running this command. Basically, this command will make subsequent file or directory creation inherit group ID from the parent directory. Let's inspect the var directory again. Okay, it's now owned by Laravel user www.data. Now if we switch back over to our browser and reload the page, it still does not change. I think I now understand the warning message I found before. Sorry, I forgot the semicolon in the server name directive. Let me check the configuration. Okay, now I no longer see the warning message. Let me restart the Nginx service and reload the PHP FPM. It should be PHP 8.1. Back to the browser and refresh the page. Okay, now I get the expected page, which is the PHP information of my server. Or, if you find a deceptive site ahead warning like this, don't worry, just hit the Details button. Then hit the Visit this unsafe site link. With that, we can now remove our test file. Let's switch back over to our terminal and execute this command. This command will force removing the public directory as well as the index.php file inside it. Later, we'll pull our Laravel project from GitHub and place it inside this directory. With Nginx and PHP setups, our server is able to accept HTTP requests and handle the dynamic site. We also have a MySQL server installed so that we can store and manage some information for our site. But we still need to do some tweaks to improve its security. To improve MySQL installation security, MySQL comes with the MySQL Secure Installation script. However, as of July 2022, you'll get an error when running the MySQL Secure Installation script on a fresh MySQL installation. To solve that, we need to change the authentication plugin of the root account from authsocket to MySQL native password. Basically, the authsocket plugin requires you to invoke MySQL with sudo privileges. So, let's run sudo MySQL, then hit enter. You may need to enter your server's password. Once you've entered MySQL shell, you can check which authentication plugin is for each MySQL user accounts by using this command. As you can see, the root user has an empty authentication string and uses authsocket plugin. The root password itself is stored here. Now let's change the root accounts plugin to use MySQL native password. To do that, we can run the alter user command. Root at localhost identified with MySQL native password. By the password specified. Now, we can verify the changes by rerunning the previous command. As you can see, now the authentication string column for the root account is no longer empty, and the plugin has changed to MySQL native password. We can now exit from MySQL shell by typing exit and hit enter. Alright, let's now run MySQL Secure Installation. Let's enter a password for MySQL root account. By running this command, you'll get a series of prompts where you can make some changes to your MySQL installation's security options. The first prompt will ask whether you'd like to use the Validate Password plugin, which can be used to check whether the new password is strong enough. If you enable the plugin, any MySQL user you create will need to have a password that meets the policy you selected. In my case, I'll enter Y, and then enter. The next prompt will ask you to select a level of password validation. In my case, I'll choose one for medium. As you can see, the medium policy requires the password's length greater than 8, contains numeric, mixed case, and special characters. Let's hit enter again. Here I get feedback telling me the current root password strength. It also asks me to change the password for the root. I hit yes. And I'll enter a strong password so that it meets the policy I previously selected. Then re-enter the new password to confirm. Now, the password strength is 100. I'll hit yes to continue. Next, you'll be asked to remove anonymous users. Hit Y or yes to proceed. Next, you'll be asked to ignore the root user to log in remotely. For security reasons, let's hit Y. Next, you'll be asked to remove the test database. Hit Y and enter to proceed. Last, you'll be asked to reload MySQL privilege table. Hit Y again to proceed. Alright, MySQL secure installation is finished. Let's now change the root's authentication plugin back to authsocket. Since the root account now uses MySQL native password, to authenticate as the root user, we need to run this command. MySQL-u root-p. Hit enter, and then input the root's password. Now, let's change the root account's plugin back to authsocket. Sorry, it should be identified with authsocket. Note that, after we execute this command, every time we connect to MySQL with the root account, we'll be using sudo MySQL command as before. And let's verify the user table. As you can see, it now has an empty authentication string. And use the authsocket plugin as before. Next, let's now create a dedicated MySQL user for our app. The reason why we're not using the root user account is that it has unlimited privileges, and it's a bad security practice. That's why it's better to avoid using that account. Let's start by creating a new database. In my case, I'll call it Laravel_DB. Next, let's create a new user account in our database. Here I'll call it Laravel, with MySQL native password. Now we can verify our new user by rerunning this query. It's hard to read actually, so let me clear the screen. Then execute the query by excluding the authentication string. Okay, we see the Laravel user added there. Next, we need to grant all privileges to that user on all tables of the Laravel DB databases by executing this command. Grant all privileges on Laravel DB, all tables, to Laravel at localhost. Last, let's refresh MySQL privileges by running this command, flush privileges. Alright, now we have a new database, as well as a user for our Laravel application. We can exit from MySQL shell. Let me test connecting MySQL shell, using the newly created user. And show the databases. Okay, we've successfully configured our MySQL installation. Let's move on to the next video. We have installed and configured the LEMP stack in our remote server, and we are almost ready to deploy our Laravel application. Now, to make our deployment easier, we need to set up the SSH key in our local computer, in our remote server, as well as in our GitHub account. You can see the communication between our local machine, GitHub, and remote server in this diagram. So, we push our code from our local machine to GitHub, or pull the change from GitHub to our local machine. We log in from our local machine to our remote server. Then, from the remote server, we pull our code from the GitHub repository. Alright, let's set up an SSH key in our remote server to connect to github.com. The reason why I'll start setting up the SSH key from the remote server instead of from the local machine is that I already set up the SSH key in my local machine to GitHub, so I may not show it in this video. However, you can follow the steps that I'll show you later. So, to generate the SSH key, let's run the SSH keygen command. Specify the algorithm type to RSA. Then specify bits for the key size to 4096. If we hit enter, we'll get a prompt asking us for a file name to save the key. Just hit enter to accept the default file location. Next, we will get another prompt to enter a passphrase. Let's hit enter to leave the passphrase empty, and then hit enter again. Now if you look inside the SSH directory, you'll find SSH key pair called IDRSA and IDRSA.pub. The IDRSA is the private key, and you don't share it with anyone, while IDRSA.pub is the public key, and we can share this key with the public. Now you can open the IDRSA.pub with cat or your favorite editor. Then copy all content to the clipboard. Next, go ahead and open your GitHub account. In the top right corner, click your profile, then click Settings. In the User Settings sidebar, click the SSH and GPG keys link. Click the new SSH key button on the top right side. In the title input, let's add a short description for the new key. In my case, I call it SSH for Laravel App DigitalOcean. In the key input, just paste the public key. Okay, let's hit the Add SSH key button to save our key. If the confirm password is prompted, just enter your GitHub password. Now, you can test the connection from your remote server to GitHub by executing this command. ssh-t git github.com. Hit yes to continue and hit enter. Make sure you get this message. If you get a permission denied message, you need to add your SSH private key to the SSH agent by running this command. Additionally, you may configure your username and email in Git global config. Alright, we successfully set up the SSH key in our remote server to GitHub. With that, we can pull our code from the GitHub repository without the need to enter any password. Okay, let's now set up an SSH key in our local machine to connect to our remote server. The steps are almost the same. We need to generate an SSH key in our local machine. After that, we copy the SSH public key and put it in our server. Alright, let's open a new terminal window. Then generate the SSH key by executing the SSH keygen command. If you haven't set up any SSH key in your local machine, you may use only this command. However, since I have set up the SSH key before, I'll add the F option and specify the file name. In my case, I call it Laravel app-do. Hit enter. And we can then enter the same input as before. Note that, other than IDRSA, the SSH key will get lost in the SSH agent once you restart your machine. To do that, you need to add the SSH key to the SSH agent manually by running this command. Alright, let's now open the public key of our newly created SSH. In my case, I'll use the cat editor, but you can use any editor. Then, let's head over to another terminal window where we log into our remote server. Then, let's cd to the .ssh directory. Inside this directory, let's create a new file called authorized keys. Hit the I key to use insert mode. Paste the code. Hit the escape key. Hit a colon. Then hit W to save the change. Then hit Q to quit the Vim editor. With this setup complete, we can now log into our remote server without the need to enter any password. Let's try that. Let's exit from our remote server. And then relog into our server. Okay, now we no longer need to enter any password when connecting to our remote server. Next, to set up the SSH key in your local machine to GitHub, you can do the same steps as we did when setting up the SSH key from our remote server to GitHub. So, go ahead and do that right now. In the last video, we set up SSH in our local machine, in our production server, as well as in our GitHub account. Now in this video, we'll finally deploy our Laravel project in our production server. Alright, the first thing that we need to do is to add our project to a Git repository. If you already done that, you may skip this step. Alright, let's head over into our terminal. Then, let's cd or change directory to our Laravel project. In my case, I'll cd to desktop, deployment, and then Laravel API. Then, let's initialize a new Git repository by running git init. Then, let's add all files to the staging area. And last, let's commit the last change into our local repository. Alright, we have a local Git repository. Let's now create a remote Git repository in our GitHub account. Let's head over to our browser, then open our GitHub account. Let's hit the plus icon on the top right. Then hit New Repository link. In the Create a New Repository page, you can enter the repo name inside repository name input. In my case, I'll call it Laravel 10 API. You can optionally enter the description of your repository inside description input. Then you can set whether your project public or private. In my case, I'll choose private. And you can finally create your repository by hitting the Create Repository button. Once the repo is created, you can jump here. Let's copy the first line. Back to our terminal, paste the code, and then hit enter. So, by doing this way, we added a URL of our remote repository to our project. Next, you can rename the default branch from master to main. Then, to push our code and local repository to our remote repository in our GitHub account, let's execute this command. Let's copy the line. Back to our terminal, paste it there, and hit enter. Once that's done, you can go back to your remote repository, then refresh the page. And you will see the file structure of your Laravel app on the screen. And with that, we have remote repository ready, and we can clone it from our production server. So, let's hit the code button. Make sure you're using SSH. Then copy the URL of our project to the clipboard. Switch back over to our terminal. Open a new window, and then log into our remote server. Let's change directory to directory where you will put your Laravel project. In my case, I'll put it in var www Laravel app. There, let's call the git clone command, and then paste the URL of our remote repository. Make sure you're not hit the enter key before you add a space and followed by a dot. By specifying the dot after remote URL, it will tell Git to clone the repository and use the current directory to put your project. If you did not specify it, the git clone command will put your project in a new directory. Let's see. Okay, here we see the Laravel file structure. Next, let's now install Laravel dependencies by running the composer install command. Okay, next, we need to have a .env file in our remote server. We can simply copy it from .env.example file like so. Then, we also need to generate the application key by running php artisan key generate. Then, let's open the .env file, and then configure our database settings. Here, I'll change the database to Laravel DB. Then, I'll change the username to Laravel, and then specify the password. Since the password contains $, I need to wrap it with single quotes. And if I not forget, it should be 4 instead of an A. Okay, let's hit the escape key, then hit a colon, and then type WQ, and then enter. Now, let's migrate our database. php artisan migrate, and then hit enter. With that, let's now switch back over to our browser and open our app. Here I get an error, failed to open stream, permission denied. The exception occurred while attempting to log. To fix that, let's switch back over to our terminal and then execute this command. Back to our browser, and then refresh the page. Okay, now we have a Laravel welcome page displayed on the screen. Let me enter the tasks in point. API version 1 tasks. Here I get the expected result. Currently I get an empty array since I have no tasks. Congratulations, you have successfully deployed your Laravel application in your production server. In this video, we'll see how to push the changes in our local repository to our production server. Alright, let's switch over to our editor. And here, you may add new features to your app or make any changes according to your need. But in this video, since my Laravel app only provides API, I'll remove the default welcome page. So, let's go to the routes folder, then open the web.php. Here, I'll get rid of the root route declaration. Okay, I'll save the change. Then, I'll start up the server. Then I'll access it in the browser. Okay, here I get a 404 error, which is the expected error. With that, let me kill the server. And let's now push our local change to our remote Git repository. Alright, let's go back to our terminal window where we log into our remote server. Let's cd to our Laravel project. Then, before we pull any changes, we can set our application mode to down by running php artisan down. By doing this way, the whole service becomes unavailable, and visitors will not interrupt us to do any deployment actions. If we go here and refresh the page, now we get 503 service unavailable error message. We can now pull the changes from our remote Git repository by running git pull origin main. If you make any database changes, you'll also need to run database migration, php artisan migrate. Since I don't have new database migration, I got a nothing to migrate message. However, if you have new migrations and they are not migrated, you'll get a confirmation message. Just answer yes and hit enter to proceed. Also, just in case your changes involved any third-party packages, you will need to install those packages in your production server by running composer install. Once that is done, we can get the app working again by running php artisan up. I'll go back to my browser. And once I refresh the page, I should get a 404 error page. Okay, I get the expected error page. However, if I hit the tasks in point, here I get an empty array since I don't have any task yet. In this video, we're going to add domain and SSL to our production server. To follow this lesson, you need to have your own domain. In my case, I already purchased a domain in Namecheap called toto.pro. And you may use my affiliate link in the course resource to purchase your domain. Alright, let's go to our DigitalOcean account. Then, let's hit the Create button on the top, and then choose the Domain DNS menu. Enter your domain name in the Enter Domain input. In my case, toto.pro. Then hit the Add Domain button. Once created, we have 3 DNS records. Let's copy the name server to the clipboard. Then, let's switch to Namecheap website, or any domain registrar you choose. Here in my domain, I'll hit the Manage button. Then, in the Name Server section, I'll choose the Custom DNS option. Then enter the DigitalOcean named server. Let me remove the period at the end. Let me copy it. Paste it, then change to Name Server 2. Let me add another Name Server input. Paste it there, then change to Name Server 3. Once added, let's hit the Save button. Note that the DNS server update could take for several minutes to 48 hours. So you may wait for your ISP to propagate the new DNS. Back to DigitalOcean. And here, if you want to link your domain to your server in the hostname input, you can add an @sign. Then choose your server or droplet here. And then hit the Create Record button. Or, if you want to use a subdomain like me, just enter here, let's say API. As you can see the custom domain below here. Then link it to your server here. And then hit the Create Record button. Now, the reason why I use a subdomain for my Laravel API is that I'll use the top-level domain for my Vue.js application. If you want to have the www version of your site, you can enter another record by entering www. Or www.api for subdomain like me. Select your server, and then hit the Create Record again. Alright, the last thing that we need to do is make a bit change in our Nginx server configuration. So, let's switch back over to our terminal, where we log into our remote server. Then let's open our Nginx server configuration. Here, let's change the server name from IP address to our domain. In my case, I'll change it to api.toto.pro and www.api.toto.pro. Save the change. And don't forget to restart our Nginx service. Now, if we enter our domain in browser, here I get Laravel 404 error page. However, it may take several minutes or hours to make your domain accessible. If I now enter the Get All Tasks in point, I get the expected response. With that, let's look at how to set up SSL in our server. Luckily, the LEMP image that we chose when we create our droplet also include the certbot library, which makes easy to set up SSL certificates using Let's Encrypt. So, let's run sudo certbot, then specify Nginx option, and then specify our domain. If we hit enter, then enter our password, we will get a prompt to enter our email. Just enter your email and hit enter to continue. Next, you will get another prompt to accept user agreement. Just hit Y, then hit enter to accept the agreement. Next, you will get another prompt to share your email. In this case, I answer no. OK, account registered, requesting a certificate for the given domains. And now, I get a successfully received certificate. You have successfully enabled HTTPS on these domains. Let me go back to my browser, then refresh the page. As you can see, it's now use HTTPS instead of HTTP. Congratulations! Now you have SSL set up in your server. As noted, Let's Encrypt certificates are only valid for 90 days. But don't worry, because Certbot takes care of this for us by adding renew script that automatically twice a day. You can optionally test the renewal process by running this command sudo certbot renew dry run. OK, all simulated renewals succeeded.